If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast and what I'm using to make Fraudulationship to Freedom. Let me explain. First of all, it's free. That's a really great point. Second, there are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or your computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many more. And it was really quick when I first started the podcast. They got that set up super quickly. And you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
I want to continue the theme of being strategic when you communicate with a narcissist, sociopath, or toxic person. Today's topic is self-respect effectiveness. What is self-respect effectiveness? Self-respect effectiveness is all about acting in a manner that keeps your self-respect intact after interacting with someone else. Sometimes people think that they have to sacrifice self-respect in order to get their objectives met or their goals met. Sometimes people think that keeping self-respect matters more than meeting their objectives or their goals. Either extreme can be problematic. The middle ground is keeping self-respect while acting in a manner that your objectives get met. DBT uses the acronym FAST, F-A-S-T, to help you remember how to keep your self-respect intact during an interaction. Let's go over what FAST stands for. Number 1, F, stands for be fair. Don't take advantage of the other person. On the flip side, don't always give in. Validate your own feelings during the interaction. You may want to offer a small validation to the toxic person since this plays to their weakness of needing external approval, but be careful not to overdo it because it could backfire. Ultimately, you know the other person and how they generally respond to anything that looks like agreement from you. Some narcissists or sociopaths can be placated a little bit if you offer respect or validation. Others just weaponize it. In that case, a little validation goes a long way. You're the best person to make that judgment call, but do remember to validate your own feelings. The A stands for no apologies. Don't over-apologize. Don't apologize for being alive, for making a request, for having feelings, for having an opinion, or for disagreeing. Excessive apologies can erode your self-respect and the relationship over time. Most particularly, your self-respect is really important here. So do not over-apologize, because you know that the narcissist or sociopath is not going to take any of the blame. So it's especially important for you to not apologize and take on responsibility for the narcissist, things that they should be responsible for, their attitude, their responsibility, accountability, all of that. Don't over-apologize. Number 3, the S, stick to values. Avoid selling out your values or integrity to get your objective met, or to avoid a conflict, or to keep that narcissist in the idealization phase. Be clear about what you think the moral thing to do is and stick to your position. This can be really difficult if the other person is telling you that you're wrong or is pressuring you to think like they do. Remember, your values are a boundary, and toxic people are allergic to boundaries. This doesn't mean that you shouldn't have them or enforce the boundaries. Just be aware that you are likely to get pushback, and that's all the more reason to hold your boundaries. Lastly, the T in FAST stands for be truthful. Don't lie. Don't act helpless when you're not. Don't exaggerate. In other words, don't be like the narcissist. Own your truth. Be careful not to gaslight yourself, and be aware of any attempts for that other person to gaslight you. Gaslighting can be super subtle, so be on your guard. As always, if the conversation isn't going well, and I'm using the word conversation here, but I still recommend that all your communication be in writing via email or text so that you have a written record. But if the conversation isn't going well, you are under no obligation to continue to engage with the person if it's clear that it is going nowhere fast. And this includes texting back or emailing back. Remember last week's podcast episode, or Tuesday's podcast episode, I should say, about the dear man skill and how to communicate assertively in the face of challenges. If you haven't listened to that, I would really recommend that you go back and listen to that, download the printables that go with it, and that will help you to be more assertive, coupled with today's podcast about the FAST skill, which is all about self-respect effectiveness. So let me repeat again just what that acronym FAST stands for. It stands for be fair, no apologies, stick to values, and be truthful. Here are some things to think about. Some people always put others' self-respect or other people's needs ahead of their own. How does this impact your self-respect if you do that, if you always put other people's needs ahead of your own? Think about a time when others have pressured you to do or say something that conflicts with your own moral values. How difficult was it for you to stand up for yourself? What consequences could come from giving in and violating your own values? Another question. Why is acting helpless and hopeless the opposite of building mastery, and how can this negatively impact self-respect? When have you done something that has reduced your sense of self-respect? And lastly, where do you need to improve your self-respect skills? Do you know how to validate yourself? As I was getting this podcast episode ready, I wondered, do you know how to validate yourself? Because that is one of the points in this lesson of the self-respect. And a lot of clients that I've worked with in the past really have a hard time with self-validation. So if you would like me to do a podcast episode on how to validate yourself specifically, you can go ahead and just send me a DM on Instagram or leave a voice comment on the podcast. If you think that that would be helpful, I'm happy to do that. All right. I hope you all have a very great weekend, and I will talk to you again on Tuesday. I would love to connect with you on social media. You can find me on Instagram or Facebook at Fraudulationship, or come check out the website at fraudulationship.com.